listening to Baachu Talk FM, a podcast for facilities and workplace services professionals. My name is Bhaskar Sundram, and I'll be sitting down with our facilities and workplace industry leaders, veterans, to share their stories, discuss their career, and learn how to make an impact in the FM industry. Today's guest is Geoff, Prudence, Chartered Engineer, Fellow of CIBSE, Fellow of RICS, Fellow of IWFM, and a member of Institute of Directors. Geoff is instantly recognizable leader in the FM industry and particularly known for actively championing the need for effective maintenance strategies, workable designs, and driving improved standards for delivery in the built environment. He has been involved with numerous industry activities, panels, boards, improvement initiatives, and is a chair of CIBSE Facilities Management and founding chair of BIM for FM across industry work group. Wow. He has over 40 years experience in private and public sector industries, including the banking sector, critical environment, large property portfolios, including NatWest, Royal Bank of Scotland, transport and rail infrastructure with British Rail, local authorities, including Essex County Council, district, regional government, and education sector, including UCL, with particular interest emphasis in recent years with leading change and business transformation. He is well known for developing the industry and people wherever he can, and continues also with consultancy to a range of clients. Amongst his many qualifications and awards, he is the only person in the industry who is a fellow of Chartered Institute of It's. Then you have RICS and you have IWFM, and is also a member of the Institute of Directors. So welcome to Baachu Talk. Geoff, how are you feeling about joining the podcast, Geoff? I know you are a private person.
Yeah, good afternoon. Thank you. Quite flattered and honoured to be invited to attend. I must admit, I was a bit not unsure, but whilst I do a lot of public speaking and engagements and wider public development and getting things done, I'm quite a private person. So when you invited me, I thought, well, am I really ready to be really open and share my journey and some of the details? And I thought, well, do you know what? I think we'll go for it. And actually, just, you sent me a couple of pointers and a bit of an idea of, what you might want to talk about. And I actually found it quite refreshing to sort of, I know you should always reflect and look back, but actually to make a point of looking back at some of the things I've done over the periods and what some of the drivers were, I found quite refreshing. So here we go. Look forward to it.
Thank you, Geoff. Thank you so much. So as you rightly said, Geoff, let's go back to the very beginning. Where were you born, grew up in your education and early career, please?
I was born in Ilford, Essex, often referred to as East London, and then as London has expanded, it's part of London, but the postcode and still is originally Essex. In the great time in the 1960s and the 70s, as I was growing up and moved into employment, I was fortunate enough to pass the 11 plus as it was then, and went to a good grammar school, Maysbrook. Originally it was Southeast Tech, but I was caught up in that blended time when they made comprehensive schools. And I felt I was one of those persons looking back that instead of going then on for GCSEs and A levels, like most of my friends at the school, I drifted into the lower sector and ended up doing GCSEs. I'm sure about later. That meant that I was destined for sort of a longer route to where I've got to now. But anyway, that's life, that's experience. So I then started an apprenticeship with British Rail, and not known to me at the time what was really interesting, that it was a multidisciplined apprenticeship. So again, that in later career was been good, but at the time a lot of people had either electrical, mechanical, or single discipline. So that multi-skilling was actually a benefit going forward. And then also through then, I'm very proud of my 27 City and Guild certificates. And then over the years, I've done a lot to support people who are doing that craft and vocational route for their career. And then I, again, through a later route, went to do a higher national certificate at what was East Ham College and West Ham colleges in East London. I presume they're still there and going well. And then through that, I progressed in British Rail. They were really good at giving you lots of area training in various disciplines, and I progressed through high voltage maintenance to become an area manager, which was very good at that age. And then I also then went into design work on HV switchgear systems and power systems. And then I ended doing a London South Bank University. It said where all the good building services engineers come from, to do my degree on a part-time basis.
Wow. So I think, from early career onwards, somehow you are destined and you entered the FM sector, which we'll dwell a little bit more now. How did you progress through your career from there, become associated with the facilities management, and on to all the roles that you took, both on the senior and the director levels, please?
Well, it was quite interesting, really, at the time. As part of it was forward thinking for British Rail in the 70s. There was a course called the National Examination Board of Supervisory Studies, and it was known as NEBS by its initials. And it was a course where they taught you supervisory and management techniques, had facilitated class lessons, and then also moved on to do a work-based real-life project. So that was great. It was forward thinking, because obviously even now we get people put into junior management positions without any training or support. And that was quite proactive of British Rail in the 70s. So that really sparked my interest in management, people, how to present figures. And of course, at that time, this was all handwritten. There was no Word, Excel spreadsheets. So you had to draw your circles, present your graphs all by hand and nice and neat, and then present that as part of the certificate. I think I've done a bit of research, but I think that qualification then got morphed into the Institute of Leadership and Management as a diploma at level 5 or 4 or something like that. So anyway, through my HV knowledge, and obviously I applied for the job, I then progressed to be an operations engineer at NatWest Tower in the City of London. Then obviously I'd worked in the city with British Rail and around London and always loved London. But that was my first job working in terms of buildings, and also fueled my passion for large corporate buildings, portfolios. And I remember my first day there. It was in May, and it was a very hot period, and going up to the roof to see a refit of a cooling tower, large cooling tower fan problem that had broken down. And of course, you don't want to repair in a hot period in May, June. And I remember looking round, because it was the tallest building in London. There wasn't the skyscrapers that there are now. And not only could you see the fantastic views of London that I've always had a passion for, but you could see the green right around the very edges of the city in London. Obviously, London's developed even more. So at the time, it was one of the really tall buildings, quite breathtaking. And then I moved into Broadgate for NatWest, which was their lead building, which had the biggest dealing room, biggest building management system in Europe. And again, very challenging, very hairy in the early 90s. But that really developed my expertise and my enthusiasm for large corporate buildings, big building services, and dealing with major problems. And then I progressed through there, various teams. NatWest, I have to say, were very good to me, very supportive. And I went through looking large areas around the UK, back to running all the big buildings in the city. And then in 2003, I went on to take a job with Essex County Council, around about 1,000 properties, but to lead initially a strategy for building maintenance and engineering, but then quickly developing onto driving a corporate approach to facilities management in the public sector, which was, at the time, was quite challenging. So after completing that, I moved on to more property, and I was head of transformation delivery, which is sort of a project that was involved in lots of the areas around east of England. And then moving on to University College London, very well known, world class, leading institution on all disciplines. Again, there to go to drive procurement and a good strategy for maintenance and engineering, and then quickly became Director of Facilities and Infrastructure to lead change, again, in that world-class environment. And then in recent years, my life and balance has been more around industry work, consultancy and developing people wherever I can.
Wow, what a fascinating career. And I know you only handpicked few here. So what do you feel some of the most important highlights of your working career? That's 40 plus years. Geoff, talk us through.
When you say highlights, people often say, oh, I was made this, I won this award. That's not really been my thing, although I'm obviously very proud of some of the awards that CIBSE and others have given me for what I've done over my career. For me, it was about getting things done through people. And so obviously in NatWest, effective building services and working in the city at that time. And then later on, embracing working with people and some of the CIBSE stuff, which I'm sure we'll talk about later. I was able to sort of develop and be involved with leading good proposals for standards and best practice, but also do it in the day job as well. So the highlight for me was, like, in parallel, being able to learn and develop and put those things into practice. And then I think really overall leading change through people, some major restructures and organisational change that I've led, more than the technical stuff really. But really, I think looking back, as I've prompted to do over the last couple of days since we talked about coming on your podcast, was really, like I said, I started with City and Guilds, 27, which I'm very proud of, but to go what I would call the long route from an apprentice through every stage, through the various qualifications, to not only do some great leading jobs in my personal career, but also the experience and accolades in the industry and the institutions. I think it really is my biggest highlight, the overall fact of doing it. But of course, that's getting the experience I've achieved from it.
100%. What a fascinating journey from doing apprenticeship all the way being the only fellow in 3 institutions. I can't believe it.
I think we often have conversations, and I think it's wrong to say, middle-aged men, but that was the people, the resources that were around in the 70s. And a lot of those career paths through the NHS, British Rail, Ford Motor Company, the post offices, a lot of people are doing apprenticeships now, which is fantastic. But those routes that I found myself going, there wasn't a structured career path. You just went that way. And those were the routes there. But a lot of those routes aren't there now. But it is great to see people doing apprenticeships and finding a career path for people where they can.
100%. As you rightly said, you are particularly passionate about people and changing people, leading change. I'm sure there will be tons of people in your life who have influenced in your career and in your work as well. Talk us through about a few people.
Yeah, you mentioned that as, when we said we were going to talk about just a couple of key points. So I did think and look back, and I'm a very private person, but I am going to open up and say I've not been fortunate enough. Like some people, you think, wow, their career, and you find out they've had a sponsor or a person who's been there all the time for them, guiding them, creating career opportunities. I think I can honestly say I've never had that. It's really been an iterative sort of career progression over a period of time. But thinking back, the chief engineer at British Rail at the time, there were some issues around resourcing and time and that sort of thing. And he went out of his way to say to me, Geoff, I'll support you to go and get your higher national certificate, HNC, in engineering, which at the time was a great qualification and still is now. And then when I went to NatWest, that was a great time when things were going forward in terms of professionalism, standards, working with the institutes on engineering disciplines. And the chief engineer at the time, Chris G, thinking about it, looking back, he was the person who, again, encouraged me to say, Geoff, we can support you. You need to be a chartered engineer if you're going to go and progress further and influence the industry. So I appreciated. And then whilst I was studying for my degree, and again, unusually I'm opening up here, we get through, the idea is to pass, but there was 3 particular lectures at Southbank that knew that I didn't only just want to pass, I wanted to use the experience and use it to move forward within industry and obviously influence some of the development. I know I'm going to name them: Les Norman, Tony Day and Tim Dwyer, who are still active in the industry, but I thank them so much for their support, because they encouraged me to really not only learn from the degree, but embrace the learning to take forward into industry. And then so as I progressed, John Armstrong, who was a past president of CIBSE, Chartered Institute of Building Services Engineers, I'd read a lot of the documents. He was a really well-known consultant from Arup and people like that, and a past president of CIBSE. And I'd read a lot of his documentation, and through him, he supported me to get more involved with the CIBSE guidance and what became the many versions of Guide M. And so again, a great supporter, and encouraged me to then take the lead on that field of engineering. And then when I came to Essex, a great challenge in the public sector, but a little while after I was there, they had a restructure. My boss became the director of business services, and he came from Barclays Bank, but his name was John Gilbert. But he not only was my boss, he really got what I was trying to do. So again, when you've got a boss that understands what you're trying to do around corporate FM and lead a changing culture, he really got that, and he supported me both personally and organisationally, and I'm still always thankful for that. But of course, in your day job, there's many people we could all name. I've picked out a few there, particularly for the first time I've actually come out and really named them. I really valued their support at the time. But when I was doing the NIBS course, that really encouraged me about leadership and management. It fascinated me, and I liked working with people. And at the time, I don't know if many of the listeners will remember, there was John Harvey Jones, who always is an influence on me. You can go and research and look at him on YouTube. He was former chairman of ICI, Imperial Chemicals, and he did a troubleshooter program, a series on telly. And he was the first ever to be sort of like a TV hero before the chefs and things. It was a management consultancy type program. You can still see a lot of his shows, and he actually got a BAFTA award, which he really shunned because it wasn't about that. It was about him for making a difference. But the thing about him, and his famous one, was where he tried to change Morgan cars, and they didn't respond to his suggestions. And that's one of the ones where they didn't follow. But the thing is, it struck with me, he was a real character, but he engaged people at all levels. And when you used to walk around on these programs, they'd be saying to him, introduce the people, that he really had time to stop and listen to all the machine operators. And he really, not to be seen to be talked to people, you could really understand that he was engaging and really wanting to have what people had to offer. And I follow that mantra, the fact that everybody has something to offer in the process. If you can open up and talk to people and connect with people at all levels, then you're going to get the real truth or the real problems. People are going to tell you straight. And so that was really a real good influence. And also around on this leadership front, he had a lot of famous quotes. Again, you can Google some of those. You know, lots of people are philosophers and, say famous quotes, and they're on LinkedIn every day of the week. But he used to say that as a leader, he had to earn that right every day. So just because you're a leader and you walk in and you're a leader and you tell people what to do, that respect has to be earned every day. So to me, that sums up authenticity in a leader. And of course, close to home, my wife and my family, great support, have always kept me grounded.
What a blessing that you have in your life, Geoff. I just wish more and more people continue to be part of your life and more inspire. I mean, like it's, I'm super happy for you. So while you were there in the FM, as you know, FM as an industry evolved. As you rightly said, you used to do the drawings in a piece of paper. There was no Excel, there was no Word, there was nothing there. So how did the industry evolve in the late 80s, 90s, 2000, 2010s, and how do you see it now? You might have seen everything, right? Just talk us through about that evolvement.
Yeah, certainly. Just in my view, I mean, there's very many views about the terms. And we also go back to many, many years to say, well, people did things and got things done. That was FM. But from my perspective and in my career, I think it was generally the late 80s and the 90s that the term facilities management became a bit more sort of mainstream. Like I say, there's always people to get things done and to support what we now call the core business. They may have been referred to as administration or support services. Funny enough, in my time in NatWest, although I was initially engineering before embracing the wider facilities management scope, the department was called premises, not facilities, it was called premises. And also at the time, it was often called promises because of the low level of delivery. It had a bit of a bad name. So whilst it was officially called the premises department, it was jokingly called promises. But of course, at the time I went there, not just about me, but the sort of cohort of people that joined in the late 80s and the early 90s was about making NatWest much more professional in its facilities, engineering and property. But then obviously through that period, not just in NatWest, everywhere else, things became much more of a collective, professionalising the service. Then, of course, as you well know, we had things like IBM, the big organisations, Procore, Johnson Controls, and other notable market leaders developed their models right through to the 2000s, or even the noughties, as they're referred. And then with the likes of BIFM becoming BIFM from what they were previously, I think around 1993, IFMA in 1980, and then the term facility with a Y rather than facilities from the USA, and a lot of the professional trends from there emerging into the 90s and the 2000s. And then I think, including NatWest, really, there was a lot more terms about the intelligent client function, as lots of private sector and corporates were outsourcing their engineering and soft services. NatWest even tried the total facilities model, TFM, and I think there's various views of success across the industry on that. Some in terms of hard and soft services, who's the stronger, can you contract and get good results with maybe self-delivery versus subcontracting the hard or the soft services. And then obviously, I think in the 90s, my experience, there was a lot of call through to the 2000s and even more about the strong procurement ethos around in the industry, and in danger of commoditizing skills in the industry in terms of cleaning, security, driving costs down. As an off thought, I thought the Facilities Management Association in the 2000s, as a trade organisation, tried to put some balance and make some improvements, as with IWFM, BIFM in the industry, are trying to raise the profile. And then I think exponentially more over the recent years up to where we are now, the 2010s, 2020s, is obviously the exponential increase in technology, how that's been used in FM and how it will look to drive FM going forward. But overall, Bhaskar, I think there's this skills issue right the way through. You know, the learning, the development, the right skills, the type of skills, people with the right experience and knowledge. I think that's been a continual wave right through since the beginning of FM. And I think will still be a challenge as we going forward in the future.
Well said there, Geoff. Well said. So while you were working with this, as the industry evolved, as you rightly said, you might have also seen some trends and challenges popping up, not just on the years that you just mentioned, but also what we see today. Talk us through about the trends and challenges you see that's happening today in the FM market with your 40 plus years experience, please, Geoff.
Obviously, there's the new normal, whatever that is, going forward. But technology works, doesn't it? It's proved that we don't just have business continuity. You know, the technology is there. It's how we use it effectively. I'm always quite strong in my view that good managers, good leadership have the direction. The technology enables us to get there. And I think often, sometimes technology and people who get caught up in the gadgetry often think this can do this and we can report on that. And it provides us all this information in real time, rather than what are we trying to do and how can we make it more effective than using technology. That's just my work. But I believe there will always be, whatever the new norm is, there will always be a need for workplace, workspace, whatever that may be. So whether we're hybrid or whatever the new acronym might be, I think there's always going to be an FM need. It's how we're smart about doing it. how we meaningfully embrace that technology, I believe, will be the differentiator. And it said that I've been a bit cheeky, I suppose, thinking about it on the slide, that I think Baachu, this is good. This is the first time I've really been sort of really open about things. There's a lot of social media in FM, not only in terms of help desk, people use Twitter to report faults, but FM's become a social media activity. And I'm just wondering if there's a saturation point there. I don't know. But I think there's certainly there's a great opportunity coming out of whatever new normal in the future will be. But I think now and in the future, I've just listed a few challenges that I thought I'd share. Generally, probably common known, but I think really are the things we really need to be focusing on. And that's the effective development of workplace and culture, what that is, what the solutions are. Of course, the building safety bill that's coming forward now is really going to affect owners, operators, maintainers in terms of safety and the future building environment. The performance of buildings generally, which is something CIBSE, Chartered Institute of Building Services Engineers, are obviously leading on, but actually achieving that for new buildings and the existing building stock is a real challenge. And then really getting underneath to say, well, what is the drive to net zero? They're really important challenges for the FM, as well as the building service and the built environment industry. And then sort of really indoor and of course outdoor air quality, and really smart buildings and Internet of Things. Like I said before, lots of it out there developing, but grounding that into real effective solutions is a great opportunity as well as a challenge. And currently I'm particularly interested in developing what we're calling digital-led maintenance. So predicting and driving, measuring and monitoring an effective use of maintenance. But again, all of that, of course, has to lead for the right people, the right skills, and particularly with leadership, management, and technical processes as well. So, real opportunity for going forward.
Wow, I think that makes a lot of sense there, Geoff. I think while you were progressing in your professional career, you also went on and took varied roles and contributions with different industry bodies. Interestingly enough, you are the only one who I believe is a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Building Services, Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, and also Institute of Workplace and Facilities Management, IWFM. Could you please talk some of your experiences and contribution around the industry bodies, please, Geoff?
Yeah, like I say, it was, I've been involved since the 90s, and I've been chair of the CIBSE FM group for over 15 years. And it was lots of other people, but John Armstrong really engaged and got me supported to develop and be part of the future of leading standards and trends and activities. And whilst I've worked, I'm fortunate to have been a fellow of RICS, as you said, done a lot of work over the years since the late 90s, involved with BIFM, that's now IWFM, lots of involved with developing people, courses, supporting behind the scenes development stuff for the IWFM. But I guess my heart's really in with CIBSE because that's where my chartered status is, in through to the Engineering Council. So yeah, I'm proud of what I've achieved. But and I've got a silver medal in 2010, and in 2020, apart from being a fellow, they've made me an honorary fellow, which is very nice, very kind. It's nice to be recognised. But I believe you get in and put out, there's a balance there. So, it's given me a great opportunity, and I'd encourage anybody, be it CIBSE, IWFM, RICS, or whatever association, to get involved, not just with the networking, but get really involved in the activities, because you just meet so many interesting people, you learn so much, and then through visits and events, you have the opportunity to see buildings and inside of buildings that you'd never normally have a chance to see. Not only the world-class iconic buildings, but also the real buildings and the plant rooms, and meet the people who are experiencing and sharing their experiences and ideas. And for me, it's just been a fantastic experience to learn. So as well as the nice to have things and the recognition of achievements, what you get out of it by being engaged is absolutely fantastic.
100%. I think your journey will inspire people at least to pursue in one industry, if not all three. That's good. But outside of FM, you're also part of Institute of Directors and also the Pattern Makers Library, which is also part of the FM. Talk us through your involvement in those two bodies as well, please, Geoff.
Yeah. Again, in more recent times, I joined the IOD. It sounds like I'm not, you have to pay the fees. I'm not a serial joiner, but again, that gives you network, interest, support, apart from the recognition of being a director level in the industry. Again, training, use of their business facilities, their support services. And I actually would say, through the lockdown and coming out of the lockdown, I think more than anybody, the IOD, the memberships part, has really been supportive. I think they're doing a lot more communication, not just around COVID, but actually saying, well, look, we're here informally, regional. I'm getting a lot more communication about events, support networks, and opportunities through the Institute of Directors than perhaps all of the others at the moment. So fair play to them. Like I've alluded to previously, not only for a family connection many years ago, generations, I've always had a great fascination with the City of London. And so both not only working in London through many career jobs, but actually with NatWest Tower, the city, the buzz of the city, the buildings, the history of the city. Through interest in terms of research and just knowing about London, had the opportunity to be involved with the worshipful company of pattern makers, which is one of the City of London liveries. It dates back for Royal Charter to 1670s, but obviously the trade itself apparently goes back to the 12th century. But in recent years, it's much more been involved with the footwear industry and indeed the facilities management industry. So I think some of the other guests might have mentioned that, but it's associated and supports the facilities management industry. So again, a charitable function, dinners, meeting people, again, seeing some fantastic buildings that you wouldn't normally see. The architecture, the history, the stories and the history behind some of these places is absolutely breathtaking. So not only that, again, it supports my passion for the city. And, when you think, not only attending this and being a freeman of the city as part of it, I think from Roman times, the plague, the Great Fire, World Wars, Big Bang, and now COVID, the city continues to rise and redevelop and become what it is. It's the institution of the City of London. So I just find it really fascinating.
100%. Yeah, I think I was so blessed to see you at the Pattern Makers. That's how the whole thing started. And when I entered, as you rightly said, those buildings that you walk past, that you always walk past for like so many times, the moment you enter, you have a whole new world that's been invisible, but it's there right in front of you. And once you're in, then you meet great people like you and the rest of the other pattern makers who have been serving the industry for a long time. But thank you for sharing that, Geoff. Geoff, as you know, and not only, you're kind of grounded yourself, but I know you're presented in a lot more conferences. You've been part of advisory panels, authored a lot of articles and stuff. With this and your involvement with the industry bodies, what experience do you think it's actually provided you, and why should people consider this?
Similar to what I said, really, Bhaskar, really, as well as my direct involvement within institutions and associations, I have through CPD, which, some are mandatory. RICS, you have to register so many hours of CPD a year, formally and informally. Others aren't so strict, but through CPD and opportunities, I just think it gives you great opportunity, and I encourage everybody to develop in whatever their aspirations for a role or future is to just get involved. You learn so much more. And again, through some of my early inspirations, I've really tried to support people wherever I can and give them some information and point them in the right direction of either CPD, network events, or even visits to other buildings, particularly people coming early into the industry, to try and encourage them to get the confidence to develop.
Well said, Geoff. I think, fascinating career. We talked a lot about FM industry and stuff. And let's just continue. While we were continuing this for the past 2.5 years, we had COVID. So how have you seen this overall COVID impact on the FM industry, and how was it for you personally as well?
Very interesting question. I think FM has responded well. The wider FM. There's lots of unsung heroes supporting NHS, government decision makers in managing buildings, and now through the transition, but particularly the frontline people, and the potential and the impact of it. There's been a lot of people that have lost friends, directly relations in the FM or wider industry. It's impacted everyone in every shape, some more tragically than others. And I think FM coming out of it will find its level, and it will be recognised, particularly the unsung heroes, the support and people have kept buildings running, even though people haven't been there. People on the front line of supporting NHS, the government buildings, the FM teams have still been there, working long hours, changing things around, and now finding ways to bring buildings back to life and repurposing some of the buildings. Then that also is a significant challenge. For me, I think it's affected everybody mentally. I found it particularly hard as a social person. I'm not a great social networker, but I do obviously, like all of us, have meetings online. But I found not having the presence, chairing meetings, being able to physically be in the space with people, particularly challenging. I really did find that difficult. And I've always said, apart from mental illness, mental awareness and health week, it should be every day. Every day. There's a lot more. It was fantastic that there's monitors, there's mental health ambassadors and poster campaigns, all that fantastic. But I think we all should step up and support people wherever we can. So, I've often said jokingly, many industry colleagues would know that I've said, you can have as many people on your phone or in your network as you want. You only need a handful of people on your phone. The people who are going to not only answer your call, but the people who might call you when you've got a dark day. The rest you can get off internet, off LinkedIn and whatever, they're all out there. But who really answers your call when you need them, or who checks up on you when you think you may be having a down day? And again, in the spirit of openness, in my time, particularly through the pandemic and the changes over the last couple of years, I've got people like Mike Green, Lawrence Allen, just normal people in the industry, Ian Thomas, Keith Pedder, and David Flynn. I've been open and named them. People who would just ring me to say, haven't heard from you, Geoff, how are things? And likewise, I've done the same for lots of other people. There's lots of great campaigning about bad days, and people may not be feeling well, just give them a call. But people who actually just pick up the phone to someone, I'm saying to these people, thank you. But people, you should do that, because you might be lightening someone's load. You don't know. You just might be catching them at a moment to say, how are you? How can I help? They may not tell you the real how they are, but at least you've got an opportunity to lighten their load.
Wow, what a beautiful, that's so beautiful. Thank you so much, Geoff, for sharing. I think you're right. You could have all the people in LinkedIn and social media, emails, virtual talk, but when you are in need, who called you and who will you call? And those are very
exactly
in your phone book. Well said. So, we already talked about future of FM and stuff, but what COVID has done is COVID has accelerated the pace of change. How do you see the future of FM emerging from this? Because you have seen this. For us, it could be the first crisis that you're seeing, but you might have seen this before, like 3-4 times, but the names might be different. How do you see the future of FM emerging from this, Geoff?
I think FM clients, customers, service providers, people are really taking stock now. The workplace conundrums will continue, I believe. People will find, I don't think places like the city, Manchester, Newcastle will disappear. Some might be using their real estate differently. Some might be readapted for retail. There's talk of that. But, you know, a lot of these larger buildings are there. They might be repurposed. We've got the carbon challenge. But I think FM will find a way. And I think the drive to zero procurement, drive out the cost. People are now saying, no, I'm a person, I'm providing a good service. You know, the cost can't be driven to the ground. We have to find a way of realising the value of FM. And I think FM will respond to that challenge. So I think we're already seeing some ideas. And again, with technology, may enhance it. But I think we'll find a continuum of FM that will be right for whatever the new normal is.
Totally. Well said, Geoff. So again, personally, have you seen, COVID reminded you that people are kind and good?
Yeah, I think, like I said, you know, I've even shared my own personal thoughts where, you know, people who I've really valued had just given me a call to ask how things were because they hadn't heard from me. And I think as well as the people, you know, tragically, people who have been directly affected, either long-term illness or even unfortunately lost their lives, I think it's made people stop and think about their own time. I notice out and about, people are much more courteous, respectful of others' time. People are really thinking their lives a little bit more. I still think you've got the noise, the peripheral of all people doing different things, but I've certainly noticed a difference of people sort of taking stock. And then so I think we're going to see a change of that. I can't predict it, but I just think even people time they take, you know, I was talking to someone today, you just naturally assumed an hour and a half to 2 hours each way was normal commute. Now people are saying, really? Is that really what I want? Is there another way?
Correct.
I mean, I've still, I shared my point about the like of being in a room and engagement and being a social person and getting things done and the buzz, working in teams. And yet, I remember I was saying, well, no, I'm not going to do 8-hour sessions. You know, I don't mind doing a 2 or 3 hour session to support people and a contract or a development thing. And then here we are now, I've got more international clients than ever because it's so easy and the technology works and we're finding our ways that, you know, it might be nice if it's, oh yeah, I like to go to the Middle East to do a training or a coaching session or a restructured development team. But when you can do so much over the airways, people are valuing the time that they've got to do other things.
Totally. Well said, Geoff. Well said. David, so far we talked a lot about your career, but let's talk more about you, David. Tell us 3 things not many people know about you.
So here goes. I'm a lifelong music and pop fan, particularly the 1960s and 70s and onwards. I play drums. I had my first drum kit age 7. I played till my early 20s and then I didn't play at all. And then I had a 20-year break and then got back played in a number of bands and sessions. The favourite single I played on is called The Sea Will Tell, by a brand called The Brights in 2004. So you can check it out on YouTube or vinyl. So I enjoyed that. And in recent months only in recent months, I've discovered walking football.
Walking football, oh, interesting.
So for people of us more mature age, there's this complete culture of people starting to play football later in life, but you have to walk. There's no running. So that's the third thing, just to keep fit and be active. I've discovered that in the last few months.
Oh, what a fascinating interest that you have. But outside this, any other hobbies and interests, Geoff?
Yeah, my family is top for me, but again, London history, biography, just sort of life balance. Also got other interests like collecting. I play golf twice a year with some of my old NatWest people from many years back. Really living life more balanced, gardening and relaxing, really.
Perfect. I think that's the fulfillment is the main thing, Geoff, and looks like you have an amazing balance, as you rightly said. Geoff, I know you like London, but if you have to pick up any place outside London, what would be your favorite places to visit?
Well, interestingly, I have to admit, for many years I was a workaholic. I'd have 2 weeks off, but the rest it was all even full on, fidgeting in the sun. But over the years, my wife has encouraged me to enjoy holidays, take some more breaks. So ideal holiday, like in recent years before COVID, would have been sometimes in the city somewhere, markets, the hustle and bustle, and then a week or two on the beach. Places like Malaysia and Thailand, very nice. And also a cruise, something like that. But obviously COVID, like I said before, has made everybody rethink. And also the great places we have here in the UK. Last November with the family, we went to Whitby. Very nice. I love Yorkshire. There's so much of Yorkshire to see. A lot of it's been on the television recently, the coastline, the towns, the countryside. So more about that, really. One memorable holiday in 2015, I did the blues cruise in the States. So from New Orleans up through to Chicago, following all the blues musicians, Elvis's house. And I was particularly fortunate to get up and play drums in New Orleans and Memphis with a band. And so that was a nice part of the holiday as well.
Wow, New Orleans is one of my favorite destinations, but I'm glad that you enjoyed New Orleans as well. From the food to the music, like that. So that's an amazing place. So you did mention, you enjoyed 1960s, 1970s musics, and you also play drums in pops, and you also do a lot more. What's in your Spotify or iTunes playlist now, or is there any favorite pop group that you listen to?
Interestingly enough, I don't have Spotify. I'm new and used CD, and also continued to buy vinyl and still do. A playlist is really varied. If I had to set up a playlist, it would be soft or yacht rock, as it's known as. You heard the term yacht rock? People like Steely Dan, the Doobie Brothers, Boz Scaggs, 70s, 80s stuff. Towards rock and blues, my favourites are Rory Gallagher, Stevie Ray Vaughan, and also entertaining-wise, the Sensation Alex Harvey Band, big band in the 70s for me. And then in terms of the pop culture, the mods, that sort of stuff, the Small Faces, the Who, and the rest of the 60s bands. And then there's Northern Soul and disco. Got quite a flavour for that sort of stuff. And then initially through my kids growing up, indie and Britpop, people like Suede, McCalmont and Butler, Morrissey, Echo and the Bunnymen, the Stone Roses and Squeeze, those sort of bands, all would be on the playlist. And my all-time band called The Faces, I don't know if you've known of those, but on reflection, I guess it's my youth in songs of the 70s,
Wow, I think you can easily write enough about the pop groups, I think.
Yeah, I also like, I don't do a lot of quizzes, but I really like the culture and the information and the backgrounds and the knowledge, documentaries as well. So, although I don't do many quizzes, I like the information behind it. I don't mind a bit of classical, bit of jazz, bit of crooners, but really that what I talked about there, that's my real focus. That's what fires me up.
Got it. What song comes to your mind when you're alone, and is there any song that you sing only when you're alone?
No, I think it depends on the mood. There's alone and there's dark alone, and then there's thoughtful, peaceful alone, isn't there? But anything, I quite like a ballad with a good guitar solo or something like that, Pascal.
Wow, definitely. That's nice. That's nice. And do you like cooking, Geoff?
No, I like eating, unfortunately. But I've never really gotten to the other side. I think I could survive, but I'm fortunate that my wife likes trying out different menus, likes menus when we eat out, and likes trying out different variations of food. The only thing I don't like is some types of seafood and that sort of thing. But apart from that, I'll try most things.
So if you could only eat 3 foods for the rest of your life, which 3 foods would you pick up?
Well, at about 3 books, I've got a couple of shelves full of documentaries that I've bought and haven't started yet. So documentary, biographies, books around London. I've got loads more to read, but I've never really, even from school, got into fiction stories, you know. I didn't really like it at schools, and maybe engineering, maybe way we are. I like factual things, you know, so that's what's drawn me to that sort of stuff.
Got it. I think when it comes to facts, obviously, as you rightly said, you have seen a drastic amount of change in the industry that you work with, and also in the way people also needs to evolve with the change, etc. Do you have any views on leadership and engagement and development teams, or is there any?
Yeah, as I said before, Bhaskar, I think my route, not intentionally, has been sort of a long experiential route. I don't know if that's a term people use. You know, I had a job, I only applied for jobs that I thought I could do, and then I learned more and then I progressed. Been very, very fortunate, you know, again, talking to you today and, you know, preparing and thinking about what we might talk about. I've been very lucky, but as I progressed, read more books, and not psychology, more around leadership and models and that sort of stuff. But I still believe in true collaboration as a leader. You know, back from my John Harvey Jones stuff, you know, you really got to engage people at all levels and really mean it. Overall, you know, everybody wants to belong, don't they? You know, I talk about golf, bands, it's a togetherness, and even like being kind coming out of the COVID. People want to belong. You know, you get people with a common value, a common thought, and I think you can really move along. I mean, that's obviously challenging when you do restructures. There's people that don't believe, don't want to believe, are against what you're about, what you're trying to do. But if you can realign hearts and minds and get them on board and work together as one team, then I think that's great. I much prefer graphics and 4-box models. You know, I'm a conceptual type person. And I'm a great advocate. Even now, lecturing and supporting students and people. I'm a great advocate of the balanced business scorecard. You know, in the 90s, we used it in NatWest. I still think it's very valued today. 4-box model, encouraging people to look at the different dynamics, ways, things that can change, what the risks are. And I think real inclusivity is about bringing everybody to the party. Everybody has something to offer and needs to be valued. And I also think as a leader, you have to be balanced and be kind and be thankful. And not only be thankful, but say so, even for the smallest things in life. And I think that's, you know, that's the way that I've found my way of engaging and leading change, really.
Wow, very sound advice, that one. There are so many personal traits that you have. Is there anything that you always aspire to become?
Well, when you say aspire to, I think the things that I sort of bring to the fore is I'm a values person, really, principles, values. Things got to be right, they've got to be fair. And above all, really, authenticity and integrity is most important to me, not only for me, but what I expect from other people as well. Whatever the journey, yeah?
Totally. Well said, well said. So again, over the years, you know, you might have worked with a lot of people, which you kindly mentioned, and also you learned a lot of stuff through books and resources, contributing, sharing. What's the best piece of advice you received, and from whom?
I've just got a prompt of, I mean, there's loads, you know, every time you turn on the computer, there's a philosophy, there's someone like Tom Peters, there's maybe a school teacher, maybe there's a poem or whatever. For me, I thought about it, and I think there's 3 really, rather than 1, if I'm allowed. First of all, for my wife, just saying, just be yourself, Geoff. And when you think about it, I mean, this was many, many years ago. That links into the authenticity, honesty, you know, just be yourself and it will shine through. I'm going to name another person now, a common name, but his name's Tom Smith, and he's now a leading consultant with Lane 4, big management consultancy. But he told me in the 1980s, he said, do 1 paper or a conference every year. And I thought that was great advice, because once it got me on the route of public speaking, finding out your own level of knowledge, going to a venue and meeting new people, networking, and also building on your own profile that you have a voice in whatever industry you're in. So that was great advice. And then finally, it's a bit tongue in cheek. It's my sons that said, "Dad, don't get rid of your vinyl."
And the one thing that I would strongly recommend is listen to your wife, Geoff, first, and then everything else will follow.
And something else, I just come to me. You said about traits. People that know me through industry will know I'm a bit of a stickler for time, particularly when chairing meetings. You know, Geoff doesn't do late, like, you know, on our calls. You know, I like to be on time. And there was a quote on when I played in my last band on our website, because I'm particularly strict on time on starting and stopping meetings and making sure everybody gets an opportunity. So there was a quote on the website about me not being late ever. And the phrase I had on there was, "How can you be a drummer if you can't be on time?"
That's a good one. That's a good one. Obviously.
So again, that's another trait of mine, about always wanting to be on time and be ready.
You already shared enough nuggets on the talk here, but is there anything else? What advice would you give someone starting out and wanting to pursue a similar career like yours?
Like I said, my career was experiential. It developed incremental over many, many years. And I've been, you know, looking back on this today, very fortunate, you know, when you're thinking, well, you pack many years in, you know, we do what we do because our partners, our wives, our whatever relationship you're in, it's a team. And, you know, out long nights, institutional work, or even the day job takes a lot of time. But I think I've said on numerous times, as I still do when I'm helping students, or if I'm supporting or coaching organisations or developments, I always say, especially if they're early in their FM career, find out as much as you can about everything, network. But what you need to try and do, I believe, is find something that really fires you up and you're interested in. You know, people come into FM from HR, from admin, from engineering, like I did, or maybe from security, but that may not be where you end up. It's a broad scope of services. So I think if you can get fired up on something that really is interest, dare I say passionate, then I think you've got more chance of learning and developing and getting roles and increasing your scope in your career about something you're really, really interested in. So, but overall, I always say to people, generally, I believe that people are kind. And if you ask, and certainly people developing in their career, early FM career, people will always help. So I said, ask them, you know, if I can't tell you, I'll find someone. But people will always generally, if you ask, give you some help, especially if they know you're trying to develop and you're keen in your career. And on that, I must admit, Pascal, sometimes I think, should I have been more pushy in my career earlier? You know, it sort of evolved. And then I think, well, I'm pleased with what I've achieved and I can live with what I've achieved. So, you know, we're all different, but I'd certainly encourage people to find out a lot of what they can and find something that's a real spark of interest for them.
Wow, that's great. Geoff, again, you know, we are at the end of the podcast episode now. You know, 40 plus years of career, you know, multiple chartered degrees, multiple fellows, you know, experience in both public and private, and so many laurels, lots of blessings in relationships. What are your plans now with your business and industry activities?
There's a lot going on with CIBSE, Chartered Institute of Building Services Engineers, and we've got some new stuff coming around on updating GuideM and the maintenance. For me, it's continue with life balance coming out of the pandemic, whatever that means. Developing the industry, developing some business stuff. Like I said, the use of IT has meant I've got more stuff going on outside of the UK, but really a balance with life. Enjoy the family, music, health and well-being, really.
Like that's the balance, as you rightly said. Geoff, as we close the episode, is there any part of your life or career that we haven't touched, or is there anything else you would like?
No, I think you've made me do some interesting reflections. And whilst I thought it was not uncomfortable, but different, I've, as you've seen, been as open as I possibly can with, you know, who has influenced me, how I thought about it, how things progressed. And I found it quite refreshing. So thank you, Pascal. It's been really good.
Thank you, Geoff. It's an absolute honor and privilege to have you with us at Bachi Talk FM.
Thank you for asking me. Thank you.
All the good.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.